Hey, what's good everybody? Welcome back to another video. Today's topic is going to be discussing how I approach tunes, albums, EPs, etc. in regards to my own thought process of music. Now, it doesn't need to be said, but everything that I say in this video is completely subjective, and there is no right or wrong way to try to approach music in such a way. Some people want to make bangers. For me, I try to focus more on the story elements because to me, these are different things that I tell that's either going on in through my life or things that I've imagined in my head that I want to see in a physical means. I guess physical or audible means, or you know what I'm saying. Before I get started, if this is your first time coming into the channel, I would always appreciate a like, follow, subscription, comment, questions, all that other stuff. The more that you guys interact with my channel, the more that it helps me grow, and I'm kind of getting close to 5,000 subs, which thank you guys. Any little bit helps. So with all that out of the way, let's talk about kind of like storytelling, I think is the big element. In any kind of form of media, in my own personal humble opinion, any kind of art, it's in some way or another telling a story and means that it has a beginning, middle, and end. Now, how much we choose to flesh that out is always different, but if you can kind of master that aspect, then it will not only help you find structures to your tunes, but it will also help you build a narrative if you so choose to do so when you're wanting to take a person from one place to another. You ever listen to a song and like everybody gives that cliche thing of like, yo bro, you gotta listen to this song, it takes you on a journey, the journey, and you're kind of like, dude, that's so like cheesy or whatever, until you actually listen to it and you're like, dang man, that was crazy. Cohen Sound album, right? Anybody? And it's like, okay, well, how do we get there? So a lot of those elements and stuff kind of come into specific techniques, quote unquote, or specific production skills that people go into, but more than anything, it's about setting the person up for something and taking them along with you and doing it smoothly. If you hear me say anything about life, martial arts, tricking, whatever, I always say two things. It's all about perception, and it's shaped and based off of how well you can transition. So perception and transitions. You kind of see where I'm going with this, yeah? How you perceive something or how something is perceived is kind of based on how it was given in a specific way. For example, two people can experience the same thing and tell two completely different stories because the way that they perceive the information or whatever is still always different. And that can be applied in music and any other form of art really in so many different ways. It's kind of up to you to figure out how to be creative with it. You can think of that in means of creating contrast. You can think of that in means of like stereo information, because that's kind of technically what that is, right? If like one channel has slightly different information than the left and so forth. And that's why it's really important to start to build this repertoire of knowing how to kind of use these tools in your arsenal to kind of set the person up for these kinds of things. One big thing that I'm really into, and I'm not going to play this for you just because it's going to tank my CPU, but one big thing that I've been really into is playing with space. So having something that's in mono and then making it really wide and then kind of making it go back into mono so it open and closes kind of like a breathing thing, if that makes sense. So before I get ahead of myself, let's go ahead and take a step back and let's look at some different ways that I try to think about approaching tunes in the first place. I recently came out with 2 EPs. The first one that I actually wrote was The Infinite Corridor, and then the second one that I wrote was The Source of Nightmares. Now obviously it's all like spoopy and stuff or whatever, and there was a lot of emotion behind it and stuff like that, but that stuff didn't really come out from the beginning. And that's usually how I write. It's not to say that you can't, but for the most part, whenever I was doing stuff, even within this, as if you've watched my other videos, I didn't really know what I was going for at first. And the title of this track actually became something after the chat and I were starting to hear something, which the title of this tune is now called Reactor, but that's only when it started to sound like it was in an industrial environment and it sounded kind of like a machine or something was moving up and down and whatnot. That in particular wasn't premeditated, and a lot of times whenever I make tunes, it's not premeditated, and it's okay to come into something and not have a plan of that. However, one approach that I wanted to try to give to you guys whenever you're coming up with ideas is actually doing the complete opposite, which is called storyboarding. I'm currently looking at some different things right now of how to create some new tunes and stuff, but what I've done is basically come up with a list of different track names regarding things that are relative to my life and kind of writing out little stories about it, like actual written stories. Because if I understand what's happening or what my thoughts are on this, then it's going to help me connect the emotion in a one-to-one sense. So for example, if I was really angry or something was happening, you know, like let's say I got in an argument with my brother or whatever and I wanted to write a song about that, I can say like, you know, I can write a song that's titled, like conflict, or, sibling XYZ. And I can say, this is, whatever, and I can make the story about whatever characters or something that I want. Does that make sense? And when you kind of have like a short list of that and you have this overall ending theme, then it can give you this really grand idea for either an album, an EP, a single, or whatever. But sometimes if you think about storyboarding in such a way, you can fit it into the context of music. Now, I will say that it takes a little bit of technical skill to be able to make this translation, but what you're trying to pull from the essence of this is more so in a means of the emotional response that it creates, and I guess on a more simplified level, the vibe that it gives you. Because a lot of times when you have an idea in your head, it never translates on a one-to-one basis. Like, you might have this crazy idea that's just like, and like you go and do it and it's like, and I can't tell you how many times that's happened to me. But if you can take the essence of what that feeling is and translate it in some odd job way, and it will come through practice, then you will get closer to kind of finding that feel that you're kind of looking for. That's honestly one of the biggest reasons why I've kind of strayed away from doing things melodic. I have a very rudimentary melodic approach to music making, and a lot of times I end up writing the same thing over and over and over again. And it's not to say that the melodies and stuff are bad, but I have such a deeper expectation for myself, and such like an idea for grander composition that I'm unable to do on a technical skill as of now. In the future, I might be able to do it, but as of now, unless if I can collaborate with somebody that has a cello, a violin, a harp, and all that stuff, it's fine. I can come back to melodics later. Anyways, regarding all these things, you're kind of trying to build these relationships with your own imagination and your own mind. And the more that you can use to catalyze this stuff, the more that you're going to have ideas whenever you're writing tunes. So, sorry, to summarize that, storyboarding and actually writing out stories to these things. It's also really cool discography content if you end up putting out an album. If you're like, yo, this tune was about, eating ice cream while I was sitting at the bar, and I saw this person walk in and they were wearing a t-shirt. I don't know, it could have been anything, but you get what I'm saying. So the second one is actually kind of using a different form of stimulus in order to help shape a different response. And that's kind of writing music based off of a different kind of medium. It could be, or a sense actually even. It could be something that is a picture, it could be a movie, it could be, the continuation or part 2 to another song, but it can also be something on a more simple level of like what you see, what you hear, what you feel, what you taste, what you smell. Like, has anybody ever written a dubstep tune on like something that they smell? Likely, I don't know, but the most common one that we do is also like a sense of feel, right? Because that goes into the idea of emotion. But when you're able to kind of, again, make these translations, we're basically building upon the whole idea, quote unquote, of universal language. And this is just kind of one approach that you can take in order to do that. Some of the stuff that's really cool with this is that, there's more ideas and concepts that you can play when you start talking about these things as well. For example, what if you wrote a tune based off of the idea of instinct or intuition, or the sixth sense of being psychic? The point isn't even necessarily to create something based off of that. The point of it is to use this as an idea to spring off and jump into something else. And I talked about this with the idea of cultivating creativity and imagination, but if you start from a place that has a moment and you let it take you from a different place to another without any bias or without, feeling bad about straying too far from the idea, then a lot of times whenever you do stuff like this, it's going to help you build something. And that's what it's really about, because a lot of times what you're trying to come out isn't even going to make sense until you are able to step back and look at the whole picture. And that's the whole idea of fettering and unfettering your mind. There's a book about it, just read the first chapter. It's not to say that the other stuff is useless, but just first chapter, yeah? So in regards to all this kind of stuff, whenever I think about making a tune, a lot of times I try to think about a simple concept. And the concept might not come out before I start the tune. It might start coming out as I'm making it, and that's totally fine. If I kind of like start making a few tunes that have like a similar feel or a similar vibe, then I might be able to start thinking about different stories or different kind of scenarios of which I can continue to make more ideas from. And the reason why this is cool is because it allows you to maintain a theme and then start to variate on some of the ideas that you've already created. So it could even be like you're creating something that sounds like the same song, but you're kind of giving it to somebody in a different version, or or whatever. Likewise, you can even take that idea and do the complete opposite. You're doing like light and dark, or you're doing left and right, or you're doing something that's polar opposite of, something is really heavily melodic focused, and then you take something that is really heavy focused on transients and drums and textures and whatever. The options are limitless. It really just comes down to allowing yourself to use one idea off of another. So one final thing that I want to leave you guys with is, again, kind of always talking about with beat block and all that other stuff, whatever. It's not that important. And anything that you have, if you've got beat block right now, I just want to tell you that it's okay to, be upset and be frustrated and stuff, but I want to kind of offer you a different perspective. What if you used, music production or whatever, not even necessarily as a means of, making, all the bangers and stuff that you want to do, but what if you use that as an escape to stop thinking about what you're thinking about in real life? Even if you're not making tunes, even if you have like the worst choice paralysis, whatever, the thing is that your mind is focused on completing a task within this little portal right here. At least that's how it is for me. And if you use that as a means of a meditative state, regardless of if you're making decisions or not, you're putting yourself in that world. And it might be on a surface level, it might be on a deeper level, but by doing this, it can help you kind of figure out those ideas and again connect to things that will help you draw concepts for new ones. It just has to happen in a way that is more so freeing you as opposed to shackling you down to being upset with yourself while you can't figure out a proper snare to use in your tune. I know I just threw a lot of crazy stuff at you, and I hope that some of this makes sense in some way as it does to me. But at the end of the day, these are kind of just, again, my thoughts and my approaches to some of these kinds of things to hopefully help give you guys a little bit of insight of how to allow your perspective to shift in the way that it needs to for you guys to come up with the things that you want to say in regards to music. Again, if none of this matters to you and you just, again, want to make bangers or whatever, then that's totally fine. But for me, I have a very deep connection with music, and I really want to express myself in its truest form that I possibly can on every single song that I make. That doesn't necessarily mean that I have to make every song a masterpiece. It just means that whatever moment I'm in, I want to be able to express myself in that moment and do it to the best of my ability. Thank you guys so much for watching my content. I hope that you enjoyed this small little lecture, and I'll see you in the next video.